Fun fact, for the past week, I've not been using Android or iOS, I've been using something called Calyx OS. And it's the most fascinating operating system you've never heard of. I'm going to show you why there's a need for it, what exactly it is, how it's better than normal Android, like some of the stuff it does is a complete game changer, and then how much of a threat it is to Google. Okay, so the one thing that we need to establish for this to make any sense is that Android, at its very core, is open source, meaning that its code is completely public, and because of that there are no hidden trackers or spyware. Google made it this way because back when it started, they had nothing. They were behind Apple in the race for a smartphone operating system, and so the way they encouraged people to adopt Android and develop for it was by using the fact that it's completely free and open. But this is changing. As Android started to explode in popularity, Google realized, well hey, this is great, but we're not really benefiting from this. For as long as Android remains open source, the code is everyone's. It doesn't really belong to us. What we want is really to channel this user base that we've built up and push them towards closed source Google products that do make us money, like our Chrome browser. So, as the years have gone on, Google has one by one been taking the core features of Android, the calendar, the music app, the keyboard, the camera, and improving them, but then making the improved versions of these apps closed source instead of open. They've made it such that for you to use YouTube, Gmail, Maps, or even any app that just has Google services in its code, like Uber, then you have to consent to handing your data to Google Play services, whose codebase and inner workings are completely hidden. We don't know what data is being collected, we just know that data is being collected. An average Android phone connects to Google servers once every 4.5 minutes to send them info about you. Some of it for your benefit, to allow your apps to work, but some of it probably not. You've got to remember that first and foremost, Google is an advertising company. So there's the obvious implication that at least some of this data will be used to just squeeze more money out of users by laser targeting them with just the right ads at just the right time. But there are bigger implications because we know that this data is not always just kept within Google. There are plenty of governments around the world who want to control and censor their populations, and Google has been shown to have willingly handed over user data when asked for it by those governments. We've even had cases where innocent people have been taken to court because their Google location data has shown that they were near the scene of a crime. How did law enforcement get that data? Google gave it to them. Oh yeah, and thanks to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. The point is, 99% of Android phones that you can buy off the shelf right now are tracking us in ways that we don't fully know. And this is why Calyx OS exists. But what is it? You know, I mentioned that at its very core, if you stripped away all those extras from Google and your service providers, Android is open source, right? Well, Calyx uses that core, but instead of having Google Play services as the layer that sits on top of that, it uses something called micro-G, which you could think of as a bit like a fake ID for your phone. It creates a random anonymous unique identifier, which allows it to be registered as a certified Google device, but one for which your activity can't be traced back to you. So I can use Google Maps, I can watch YouTube videos, I can download apps without needing to sign into a single account. And using this OS, you get not one, but two app stores. You have F-Droid, which provides you with 100% open source applications, whose code is completely public and so by their very nature cannot steal your data. But then also the Aurora store, which is super interesting. It's basically the Play Store, except when you download an app through it, instead of you going directly to Google and requesting that app, it's Aurora who goes to Google and gets that app for you. So the only info about you that Google sees is a random email address that the Aurora store creates for you. The only thing it can't do right now is let you pay for apps. I think they're working on that. But what's really cool is that also unlike the Play Store, Aurora tells you for every single app how many and which trackers it comes with. You're starting to get the idea. Calyx basically has most of the main perks of Android, but I've barely touched on this yet, you will not believe the privacy features. For example, it has a built-in firewall that allows you to restrict what level of internet access that you want each of your apps to have. Let's say, for example, that I really want to use the closed source Google Pixel camera app, because really the quality of Google's open source Android camera kind of sucks. But at the same time, I'm worried about the faces of my friends and family potentially being stored on a server somewhere. Well, now I can still download the app, and then just use the firewall to cut off its communications with Google. Fun fact, doing this also removes ads, and extends your battery life because you're limiting the amount of processes that are happening in the background. I've actually got the exact same phone here, Pixel 5, and this one's running Android. And when I tested the batteries side by side, this isn't a conclusive experiment, but I found that Calyx lasted 6% longer, which is still significant. Plus, it gives you supreme control over app permissions, including a visualization of how many times each permission of your phone has been accessed. But on top of that, it has a permanently active free VPN baked into it to make your internet traffic untraceable. That said, I've turned mine off because the fact that it is a single server based all the way in New York does bottleneck my speed. These are just such thoughtful features. For example, on Calyx OS, when you go into the dialer and call someone, by default, instead of using a normal voice call which can be snooped on, it will do a signal call to them, which is end-to-end encrypted. In fact, they've literally managed to swap every single data gathering app for a clean alternative that doesn't feel like a compromise. They swapped Google Chrome for Chromium, which is basically Chrome but without all the proprietary extras. Google Maps has gone in place of OpenStreetMaps. Even Google Drive is gone, and instead in its place, you have Seed Vault, which can back up all your files both to a local USB drive and an open source cloud solution called Nextcloud. But this whole privacy thing, it's about more than just privacy from Google. It's also just privacy from everyone else. For example, if you go into the dialer, you have a list of helplines. Things like the number for domestic abuse in your region, or childline, or suicide hotlines, and this software will know that when you dial those numbers, not to save them in your call log in case someone in your own home tries to pry. They've even got, I just think this is such a wacky, interesting feature, a panic button. So if I hold down my power button, I can see emergency services and the option to shut down as usual, but also this third option. And I can configure that button to do pretty much whatever I want it to. I can make it hide my private messages, I can make it delete certain apps, I can even make it factory reset my phone if I get into a really sticky situation. I spent the last 2 days trying to fault this OS, but I'm struggling. Like yes, the default Calyx user interface is kind of grim, but it's got enough customization controls that you can pretty much recreate the look of any other company's home screen. Yes, there are some Google features that you just can't use on this phone without logging into your Google account, even when you have microG. Like for example, if I just want to plot a route on Google Maps, I can do that anonymously. But if I then want to quick select from my past routes, then I am going to have to log in because Google needs to know which user I am. But this is kind of the whole appeal of an operating system like this. Installing Calyx once is not just going to immediately make you disappear off the grid like you never existed, but it is going to give you that control back. It's going to mean that you can pick the level of privacy you want based on the features you need, as opposed to just defaulting to sharing everything. This all seems a bit too good to be true. And so at this point I started wondering, who made this? Why isn't everyone using Calyx instead of Android? And should Google be worried about this? After all, it's basically encouraging people to use Google services without Google getting the full benefit from that. Well, to find out, I jumped on a call with this guy, Nicholas Merrill, who's the founder of the project and kind of a badass. He used to run his own internet service provider, but one day the FBI came knocking at his door. They said, "We want to see the data of some of your customers." But he didn't hand it to them, and instead of saying no, he sued them and won. His argument was that privacy is a basic human right, and in the exact same way that no one should be allowed to break into your home and read your diary, no one should be allowed to read your private online data. And that moment was kind of the trigger as to why he started the Calyx Institute, which is this not-for-profit company that he's saying has one goal: to bring privacy to as many people as possible. It sounds like an incredibly noble mission, so why has no one heard of this? Well, I think the fundamental barrier here is that yes, this Calyx Institute has a membership program, which does bring in some income, but because of how this entire Calyx operating system is open source, it in itself is not really a sustainable business model. I'm told that right now the team behind this is just 11 people, and with a format like this, it's really tough to take that and scale up and make advertising campaigns and get compatibility with all phones. Right now, this only works on Google Pixel devices. Besides, for the time being at least, Even though Google and other companies do have piles of data on us, and even though there does seem to be a growing population who would go to great lengths to protect their privacy, for the vast majority, it's still not enough of an incentive to go through even the minor effort of installing something like this. There's no hard evidence that for an average user in a democratic society, giving away their data causes them any harm. And so this entire pitch of trying to protect that data, it doesn't really carry any urgency. I'm the same, and to be honest, the only reason I can even do this, talk tech with you and make a living from it, is because of these trackers and spyware that Google uses. So it has its positives too. Oh, while you're out there, by the way, if you are enjoying this, then a sub to the channel would be safe. What would be a game changer though, something these guys are really pushing for, is to get a partnership with an OEM. A company like Xiaomi or OnePlus who makes phone hardware, and who'd be willing to pre-install Calyx OS instead of Android. It's definitely possible. Like, this company actually did recently just get Calyx working on a Xiaomi phone. And I could see the appeal of it. Like, let's just say Xiaomi said, yeah, sure, we'll use Calyx on one of our models. Then straight away, without any effort on their part, they've already got their slogan sorted. Keep your private stuff private. No, probably not that slogan, actually. But I guess what makes this really tricky is that Xiaomi would then be running the risk of getting on the wrong side of Google, which, given how much they rely on them, may not be the best idea. It's a tricky one, but do consider sharing this video with someone who is more privacy conscious. Who knows, maybe one day this will be the norm. Okay, at this point, I probably don't need to tell you what a VPN is. If you either want to browse the internet anonymously, change the location of your device to another country to watch TV shows from that country, or just avoid censorship, or even if all you want is to escape data throttling from your internet service provider, then a VPN is the way to go. But at that point, you're faced with the question of, which one do I go for? And from what I've seen at least, there is no other VPN that's offering close to what Surfshark is. Unlimited number of users and 24/7 support for this kind of price. If you do use the code BOSS, then you get an 81% discount as well as 3 months for free, which takes the price to basically $2.49 per month. I spend more on paper clips than that. Oh yeah, and it does also have the option to remove ads and trackers while browsing. To see the biggest nightmare tech fails of all time, click here, or to learn more about the Linux operating system, which is actually in a way similar to this, click here. My name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you in the next one. Should never have opened the source.